All right, let's dive right in. What if I told you that the story we've all been told about heart attacks and cholesterol, well, it's dangerously incomplete. For decades, we've been laser focused on one thing, but the real driver of cardiovascular disease, it's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. You know the drill, right? Keep your cholesterol in that normal range and you're golden. But what if that's just not true for millions of people? The reality is way more complex, and relying on that one number is like trying to drive down a highway with your eyes half shut. Get this. This number, 50%, that's the percentage of heart attacks that happen to people with totally normal cholesterol levels. Yeah, half. That's not some tiny fraction, that's a coin flip. A statistic so huge, it just forces us to ask, okay, what are we missing here? So this obviously begs the question, right? If high cholesterol isn't the whole story, then what is? What's the secret ingredient, the hidden variable, that decides if someone with perfect numbers on paper still ends up having a major cardiac event? Okay, our first big clue is that we've probably been measuring the wrong thing all along. It's not just about the total amount of cholesterol floating around in your blood. No, the real key, as you'll see, is understanding how that cholesterol is getting transported. Here's a great way to think about it. The old way, LDL-C, is like measuring the total amount of cargo on a highway. But the new way, looking at ApoB, is like counting the actual number of cars on that highway. And it makes sense, right? More cars, even if they aren't packed to the gills, mean more traffic, more congestion, and a much, much higher chance of a crash. ApoB gives us the real traffic report for our arteries. But here's the thing. Even a ton of particles, a lot of cars on the road, that doesn't guarantee a disaster. The condition of the road itself is just as critical. And that brings us to the true ground zero for heart disease, the health of your artery walls. Okay, picture this. Every single one of your blood vessels, all 60,000 miles of them, is lined with this super delicate, one-cell-thick layer. It's called the endothelium. It's basically a massive organ in its own right, and it's the ultimate gatekeeper between your blood and the rest of your body. Now, sitting on top of that endothelium, protecting it, is this microscopic, kind of magical non-stick force field. It's called the glycocalyx. Think of it as this invisible gel that acts as both a sensor and a protective shield, keeping everything flowing just like it should. I love this quote because it makes it so clear. You can think of this protective layer like fine grass on a riverbed. When it's healthy, it's slick and it repels stuff. But things like high blood sugar or high blood pressure, they give that grass a haircut. They wear it down, leaving it all frayed, damaged, and sticky. And this right here, this is the whole ball game. When your glycocalyx is healthy and smooth, cholesterol particles just glide on by, no problem. But when it's damaged and sticky, those same particles get snagged. It's like Velcro. They get trapped, they burrow into the artery wall, and they kick off that whole inflammatory cascade that builds plaque. So heart disease doesn't start with cholesterol in your blood. It starts with damage to the vessel wall itself. So, if the real root of the problem is this silent, invisible damage happening inside our arteries, how in the world are we supposed to see it before it's too late? Well, thankfully, we now have a modern toolkit that lets us look directly at the arteries themselves. This new toolkit has a few key parts. First, there's a CAC Score. It's a quick scan that spots old, hardened plaque. Getting a score of 0 is fantastic news. Then you've got something called a CCTA scan, which goes even deeper. It can actually see the soft, unstable plaque that's way more dangerous. And finally, you can test endothelial function to see how healthy and responsive your arteries are in real time. What this all means is that we're making a huge shift in our thinking. We're moving away from just asking what's in your blood to asking a much more important question. How are your arteries actually handling it? We can finally stop guessing and start testing the real health of our vascular system. Okay, so knowing all this, what can we actually do about it? How do you protect that vital inner lining and keep your arteries healthy? The answer comes down to creating the right environment for them to thrive, based on 4 key pillars. Now, you might be surprised by this. We always talk about nutrition and exercise, right? But look, that's only part of the story. The modern understanding of this stuff puts a massive emphasis on sleep and our light environment. In fact, you could say high-quality sleep is the most important pillar of them all, because that's when your entire cardiovascular system does its nightly repair work. And each of these pillars directly affects your artery health. When you prioritize sleep, you're giving your endothelium time to repair. When you manage your light exposure, you're setting your body's master clock. When you handle stress, you reduce the inflammation that, you guessed it, damages that precious glycocalyx. And when you move smart, you boost nitric oxide, which is that critical gas that keeps your arteries relaxed and healthy. You know, what's incredible is that all of this cutting-edge science, it actually just brings us back to this timeless piece of wisdom from way back in the 1600s. It turns out our true biological age really is written on the walls of our blood vessels. So the big takeaway here is that we have to completely reframe how we think about this. Heart health isn't about fighting a battle against one number on a lab report. It's more like being a good gardener. It's about cultivating an internal environment, day in and day out, where your arteries can't help but flourish. So if you take one thing away from this explainer, let it be this: your arteries are constantly listening. Every single meal, every workout, every hour of sleep, every moment of stress, it all sends a signal. The only question left is, what are you telling them?